Hey guys, welcome back to another Coffee and a Chat. I'm back in my chair. However, there's still noise everywhere, so oh well, whatever, right? So yesterday, because I've been talking about ways I hear God speak to me, and I had told a story about my daughter and how God had me go put some anointing oil in her drawer and all. Anyway, and how he worked in that, it reminded me of another testimony, a story that I heard years ago that has to do with the anointing oil. Now, this is back when we had our little gospel station, and there was this preacher. I want to say that he was down in the South, Brother Pate, Bishop Pate. Can't remember exactly. I think it was Bishop Pate. Anyway, at the time, he had God had told him, I want to see if I can do a little something different with this light here, with Gail's light. Anyway, that might be better. I'm not sure. Okay. So the Lord had told him to shut himself up in this building and pray over this oil, and then that God was going to put miracles in the oil. And so we had done an interview with him, and there were a lot of testimonies that he had that they had recorded of things that had happened with people that had been using this anointing oil, and he sent us a case of it, and we had, oh my word, that we just handed out. And as soon as we announced that it had arrived, there were so many people down there to pick up the oil that we ran out and had to get more. But I had kept one bottle back for myself, and that was the bottle I took the oil out of. And I will say that there were miracles that took place when I used that oil. And I have, since he still does this, I think it's Bishop Pate. And I bet you if you Google it, you can probably find him. But here, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I looked him up, and he still was handing out the oil. But I think that things have changed. You know, that often happens. Sometimes we start messing with what God's doing, and it's not always the same anymore. But I do have some of the new oil, but it doesn't seem like the old oil. And can God put miracles in the oil? Oh, yes, he can. Yes, he can. But I think that I'm not sure that it's still the way it was when it was all fresh. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, unless you want to go try and look him up and get some of his oil and see what happens for yourself. But the miracles are only in the oil because God put them there. God is still the miracle worker, and don't forget it. It's not the oil. It's God. Okay. So one of the testimonies that I'll never forget was this woman, and she said, you know, she'd been going to church for a long time. She loved the Lord, and her husband didn't want anything to do with it. And the only way he would tolerate her going to church was she had to make his breakfast and give him a cup of coffee before she left. And if she did all that, then he wouldn't give her a hard time, but she better be home no later than noon or whatever, because he had it all timed out. She didn't need to be staying for any extra long service or anything. So she was real frustrated. She said she'd been praying for her husband to get saved for years, because that was the only answer she could see, was if he loved God like she loved God, then they would be in it together and everything would be fine. And so this one day, she was like, she had some of that anointing oil. She's like, I wonder what, I'm just going to put some of this in his coffee. So she had got his breakfast ready, taken it out to him, went back into the kitchen to get his coffee, and she just dumped. She said she just started dumping that bottle into that coffee, and was like, and then she looked at that coffee. Do you know what happens when you pour oil on hot coffee? Floats to the top, makes a thick coating. It doesn't mix in to the coffee. Well, she tried stirring it. Oh no, it kept floating to the top, and she's like, I'm in trouble now. But you know what? Let's just see what happens. So she went ahead and took that cup of coffee out to him and handed it to him, and he's watching TV, and she said he takes the cup of coffee, takes a drink, and is like, yeah, whatever, go on, I'm watching my TV, And so she just go, okay. So she left, and she headed to church. Well, she was running a little late because of the whole coffee thing, and so she got in there and slipped in, and and kind of made her way up towards the front where her friend was holding a seat for her. And so she scoots next to her friend, and her friend's like, why are you so late this morning? And she goes, oh, he was really telling me make sure I got his coffee and and breakfast and everything. And I just had a couple of issues and trying to get his coffee. And but I'm here now. And she goes, what do you mean issues with his coffee? She goes, well, I might have put a little something extra in it. And about then her friend looks to the back of the church, and she goes, well, what'd you put in his coffee? Because there he is. And she's like, what? She goes, your husband just came through the doors of the church. And so that woman said she turned around and looked, and sure enough, here's her husband coming in, still in his house slippers, walking down the aisle of that church, going right up to the front and saying, preacher, I hate to interrupt you, but I just got to, because I got to get saved. And so there her husband was, interrupted the pastor. The pastor gladly stopped and shared with him, and this man gave his heart to Jesus and then went and sat down next to his wife. People scooted over and made room for him, and she goes, and he's been coming to church with me ever since. I just thought that was the greatest story, the greatest testimony of that. But she poured the anointing oil in her husband's coffee, and all of a sudden he just, she said when she asked him later, he's like, I don't know what came over me. He goes, I was drinking that coffee, and all of a sudden it's like, I got to give my heart to Jesus. I can't waste one more minute. I had to get down to church, didn't even stop to put my shoes on, still had my slippers on, and sure enough, there he was. So yeah, I thought it was a great story. So I thought I'd share that one with you. Not that it's that you need to go out and get yourself some anointing oil. That's not the point of it. The point is God does miracles, and sometimes those miracles are like the greatest thing that has ever happened in our life, and it changes the world. I knew a woman, okay, and it had nothing to do with anointing oil, but in a church I was in years ago, and this woman used to ask for prayer because she was saved and her husband wasn't. And when they'd gotten married, neither one of them were Christians. And then she had, fallen under conviction and given her heart to the Lord, loved him so much. And in order for her to go to church, she endured beatings from him before he would let her leave. He would hit her around the house, and she would, every Sunday, she would take that beating because that's what she had to go through to go to church. And she never complained. She just kept loving him and praying for him. And so when we found out what was going on, I mean, it was pretty obvious that he beat her because, she'd be coming with fresh bruises. We just didn't know that's what she was going through in order to come to church every Sunday. And so once people knew what was going on, there were people that wanted to turn him in. And she's like, please don't. If this is what I have to endure for him to find the Lord, I'll endure it. Just pray for him. So we began to pray with all our hearts. His name was Ray. I remember that. We began to pray for Ray because that was our little thing. Pray for Ray. Pray for Ray. Every day and every time we got together at church, we prayed, oh my word, from our hearts. And in just a matter of a few weeks, it was kind of the same thing where she walked into church, and a few minutes later, here came Ray. And he stopped the service. And he told the preacher, I shouldn't be interrupting you, I know, but I am an evil, wicked man. And he began to confess out his sins. And the preacher was like, well, why are you confessing these sins to me? And he said, because I need to get my life right. I need Jesus. I want God in my life, not this sin. And he broke down crying. And I was there that Sunday, and he was a farmer. And there he was just in his overalls and stuff, just like he always was. And on his knees, weeping before the Lord. He was a big man, but just weeping. And nobody said any little sinner's prayer repeat after me with him. Didn't need to. That man was crying out to the Lord. And within a few years, he was a deacon in the church and everything. I mean, he was now, instead of beating his wife before he let her go to church, he was saying, hurry up, honey, we're going to be late. Hurry up. Don't want to be late. And it totally transformed their lives. I can't remember her name, but I remember his. And And I remember the joy on her face as the Lord gave her a whole new husband, a whole new marriage, and answered her prayers. And there was no anointing oil in that. So I'm telling you, it's not the anointing oil, it's God. And it is the faith of these women. And I believe, oh, see, we're back in that room. But I believe that the reason this woman didn't never turn her husband in and didn't want anybody else to either was she was hearing from God that this is what she needed to do and just wait on the Lord. Because I am not okay with people being beat or any of that. And I do not condone that. But you know what? I suppose if the Lord told you to endure something and trust him, then you should. And being how it all turned out, I believe she did do the right thing. But I'm not, if you're going through that, you better know God's telling you to go through it. Otherwise, you don't go through that. God is not okay with abuse. And I really am not okay with abuse. So there's my little disclaimer, clarifier. Yeah, just wanted to share that. So there's two there. One about the anointing oil and the other about just trusting God. But both of them, their husbands were radically saved in much the same way. So if God can turn a hard heart like that around, what can't he do? All right, I'll see you again tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And maybe I'll be here or maybe I'll be in another location in the house. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But until then, I love you guys and you have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow.